we're here today for the Professional Audiovisual Division, which is putting on this show, the E4 AV Tour. And we have 7 distribution centers and one right here in the Dallas area to service the southwest area. And our team, we have about 35 people in our Pro AV division. And at this time, I'd like to introduce your Southwest team right now. So can I call up to the stage Colleen Eccles? Give her a hand. Camilla Mills, better known as Pammy. Yeah. Pammy. Chris Lynch. I think Chris is directing some folks. And Sean McNeil. All these folks live here in the Dallas area. Sean, thanks for being here. So this is your team, and if you need any assistance, have questions about products or about becoming a reseller partner, anybody in the green shirt, and especially these guys who are here local in Dallas can help you out. So thank you guys. We'll see you throughout the day. So right now I'm going to go through our agenda for the day. We've got a very special keynote coming up that I'll talk to you a little bit more about with Gary Kay. But we've got classes that go across the full gamut, from technical classes to business building classes. And I'm really proud this year to have a new speaker on the tour. His name is Tom Stimson. Many of you may have heard of him. He is here local in Dallas. And he's going to be teaching 2 classes. The first is going to be Don't Be a Commodity. It's going to be dealing with responding to RFPs when you should and when you shouldn't. And then we're also very glad to have with us from Infocom, Andre Lejeune, who's new to the tour. He's going to be teaching audio gain structure. That's downstairs in the Cumberland room. We also have Jonathan Braun with Braun Consulting, who's going to be talking about demystifying media players in the digital signage market. And in the Cumberland I&J room, we have a special feature. We have Epson, who's going to be teaching about color light output. They also have a technology comparison that I'll talk a little bit more about later. And then our lunch is from 11:30 to 1:30 downstairs in the exhibit hall where you registered. That's in Marsalis B. That'll be going on for a couple hours. And opening in the exhibit hall at 10 is going to be another special feature called Samsung Smart School, which we'll talk more about in just a moment. Later in the day after lunch, Tom Stinson is back in this room talking about the new AV integration model and looking forward to building your business in 2014. Secondly, Andre Lejeune back with more of a technical class on network readiness and the convergence of IT and AV technologies. Dave Arnott from NEC is here. He'll be doing a live demonstration of edge blending and talking about edge blending techniques and applications. Last, Joe Cornwall with Cables to Go. If you've never heard Joe speak, he is a technology evangelist. He's so dynamic. We're glad to have him here. He's going to discuss 5 technologies that will define AV in the next 5 years. Very, very great class. Back in the exhibit hall at 2:30, we are going to have the prize drawing, and I'll tell you about how to win those prizes in a second. And finally, from 3 to 4, we have a class about content creation for digital signage. And we have Jonathan Ron back in the Cumberland K room with metrics and analysis for ROI. This is a class that when your customer says, how do I measure the effectiveness of digital signage? How do I explain that to my end user? That's what Jonathan's going to be covering in this class. And finally, back in the room with Epson and Cables to Go, we have projection screens, how to get it right, how to choose the right screen in what application, and that'll be with Steve Scorsetti with Milestone. So a couple special features. Samsung Smart School. This is a total integrated solution. We're going to have demos every hour on the hour. It's going to show tablet technology, touch technology, and also some software that Samsung has developed for K through 12. Anybody here dealing with K through 12 schools? K through 12, a few of you. This is great. Also applicable to any learning environment. So check that out. We will be doing a drawing for a Samsung Galaxy tablet if you attend one of those demos. As I said, Epson is going to be in that Cumberland I&J room doing a technology comparison. They're going to have different different projectors there showing you, talking about color light output. That'll be going on in between the classes in that Cumberland I&J room. So Almo Brady is just announced yesterday. You're one of the first audiences to hear this. We have launched a new content creation services, and we will have a class from 3 to 4. We also have a booth in the exhibit hall telling you about how we can help your customers with creating content for digital signage, for touch technologies, bar and restaurant, a number of different applications. And if you attend our class at 3 o'clock, you'll have a chance to win 3 stock clips that we have in our library. So be sure and check that out. So we want to thank our partners for making this all possible. Thanks to them, we can offer this event free of charge. We'd like to also thank Infocom for sponsoring that. So Debbie, I don't know if Debbie from Infocom is here, but let's give a hand for our partners and for Infocom and all their sponsors. Of course, all this great technology that you're going to see here, everything that you see in the exhibit hall is available from Almo. So if you have questions about that, again, anyone in a green shirt or your Southwest team here, I'll be glad to answer any of those questions. Just want to say a special thank you to some of our partners who have graciously outfitted us with some great gear, cables to go. Daylight, Draper, Harmon for our brand new audio. Thank you, Harmon, and also NEC for projection in our classrooms today. So let's give those guys another round of applause. All right, so just to cover a little bit of housekeeping here, just some of our most frequently asked questions. How do I get my CTS renewal units? As you know, all of our classes, except for one today, do have CTS renewal units. Be sure to get your badge scanned as you enter the session, and then we will submit those credits. We'll give you certificates to submit to Infocom. Second question, how do I win prizes? Well, in your show guide there, you have a perforated card. Just visit 16 of our exhibitors. Don't have to visit everyone. We want to make sure you have quality time with our exhibitors. Get a stamp and then put that in the big raffle bin up on our stage, and we'll do that prize drawing at 2:30. We've got Galaxy tablets, we've got displays, all kinds of great prizes that you can win. So don't miss that in the break. Third most commonly asked question, how do I get copies of the presentations? You go to e480tour.com/on-demand. This is also on the back of your show guide. And you will be able to download copies of all the great presentations today, as well as see the videos we're going to be shooting on the show floor and interviews, and lots of the blog coverage that the team from RAVE is going to be doing about the tour. So, the E480 tour. Today you're going to get educated with your Infocom CTS renewal units. You're going to have a great opportunity to explore some of the latest products from 35 of our best manufacturers. Going to be able to exchange ideas with colleagues. That's one of the great things about coming together for a local event like this, that you can network and learn from each other. And some of our instructors, who are some of the best in the business, I think we have a great opportunity to listen to what they have to say about the industry. And finally, the expo, everybody's favorite part, and we're going to see some things that actually Barco is doing their projector launch. First time in the U.S. that you've seen the new projectors with click share inside. So we've also got some firsts that you're going to see on the floor. So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Gary Kay as our keynote speaker. Gary has been a part of our tour for many years now, and he is going to be talking about smart buildings. And so at this time, Gary, thanks for being a part of our tour.
See if this works. Yes, it does. All right. So this is the first time I've delivered this week. Wow, it's a lot of people here. That's really cool. Usually Sam steps up on the stage. So I wasn't ready for you to tell me I was coming up on the stage, so I apologize. This is the first time I'm delivering this presentation, so I might stumble through it a little bit. We'll see how it goes. I've obviously rehearsed it a lot and stuff, but it's about a topic that is. It's not simple to explain, but it's also not something that we should ignore, because there's a great opportunity for our industry to sort of step forward and sort of step up, to use the right term, into a new realm where our industry has an opportunity to go. We all know where I should shouldn't say we all know. How many of you have been in the industry for, say, 15 years or longer? Okay, for those of you who raised your hand, then you know this path. Where we came from is we were very much a box supplier for years and years and years, and then moved towards systems. And then now the next step is moving towards sort of smart systems, which is different than sort of the typical systems that we have now. There's multiple layers of this and multiple levels of smart systems. And so that's what my presentation is all about today is smart systems. So, and the best way for me to sort of position this is sort of show you during our professional lifetime. So during the time that most of us have been in the industry, during our professional lifetimes, we've seen this same transition. We've seen the same evolution in other industries. So this is the dash of a car from 25 years ago. This is the dash of the Tesla car, which is the most sought after car on the market right now. And this is literally, if you bought that car, anybody here have that car? Anybody bought it? There you go, it's 100% electric, battery operated car, 100 grand. And it's all touch, for the most part. But this is the dash of the car of the future. And what are we talking about in the future here? We're not talking very far off. In fact, the new Mercedes S-Class is pretty dang close to it here. For those of you who don't know, if you go out and buy the brand new Mercedes S-Class, you can literally get out of the car in front of the grocery store and tell it to go park itself. Okay, yeah, you can actually do that. And then heads-up displays is incorporating more than the speed of the car. It's also incorporating a lot more. And if you want to see that video of how the car parks itself, it's really cool. You should go to the Mercedes-Benz website and watch it. But it's not just encompassing the speed of the car, but it's also encompassing the control. Basically what's happened is we have an Internet of Things, which is sort of, to use a hackneyed term that's been going around for a long time, that's allowing us to connect anything and everything we want to have connected. Here are running shoes from 25 years ago. Here are running shoes today. So now running shoes have technology built into them. You put a chip in the bottom of this shoe, which actually has a compartment in it for that little sensor here. What's that shape? I forgot. Almo? What's that? Oval. Good gosh, I can't think today. That oval shape, you put that in the bottom of your shoe, and all of a sudden your shoe is now talking to your iPad, your iPhone, your Android device. And this is the shoe of the future. Basically, instead of having to have that sensor, you wear a contact lens that is communicating all that information, which includes your body temperature, your heart rate, your distance traveled because it's got a GPS sensor inside of it, and it has nothing to do with the shoes anymore. Basically, you don't have to connect it to the shoe. It becomes every piece of health information you need in your eye all the time. This is an actual contact lens. This is the kitchen from 25 years ago. There's a kitchen today, and we already see a lot of technology in the kitchen today. But we do have, some people have refrigerators, for example, that are capable of doing more than being a typical refrigerator. And even, for example, Samsung has one that has a tablet built into it. Now the refrigerator and the microwave and the oven can talk to each other. But this is the refrigerator, this is the kitchen of the future, in that everything is literally connected to each other, and so everything becomes a display. So, you think, well, why do I need a display on my countertop? Because then the countertop can tell me all the ingredients and actually mark out for kids when they want to make cookies. Here, put all the ingredients here, mark out this amount of ingredients, and now you've made a batch of cookies as it walks them through that process. But also so that the devices can talk to you, when you're at the grocery store, the refrigerator tells you what it needs, things like that. This is a bus stop from 25 years ago. This is a bus stop now. And this is literally one in Toronto. And here's the bus stop of the future. The bus stop of the future, again, connectivity is going to have everything to do with this. The fact that we are going to be able to be connected all the time to everything around us is going to drive everything. And so if you think about it from a consumer standpoint, this Internet of Things is actually a pretty big deal. Because what's going to happen is, whether we like it or not, we're already kind of there, because most of us carry a cell phone in our pocket. Right? I mean, some of us carry it in our purse, but most of us carry it in our pocket. And because we're carrying it in our pocket, this device knows everything about us. It knows who we are, knows who our friends are, knows how close we are to our friends, because it knows how close in location that we are to them. When we're standing next to them, it knows we're standing next to them. When we Facebook with them, it knows we're Facebooking with them. It knows how much time we actually spend with our friends. It knows where we shop. It knows what we buy. It knows how much of it we buy, and things like. It also knows how we consume entertainment. So this is really kind of a device that is connecting you to the Internet of Things. The only thing that's missing from this is sort of that next step. And why would we want to go that next step? Why do we want a shirt to be connected to the Internet? What's the point of that? Well, I'm not here to argue that point, but I am going to talk to you about I'm going to argue the point of why buildings are going to be part of the Internet of Things, and everything inside of the building is going to be part of the Internet of Things. So this is a street corner today, and the street corner of the future. The street corner of the future is that everything is going to be connected. The buildings will know when all the employees are arriving before they arrive and approximately what time they'll be there. It knows what spaces are available. It knows when to change the HVAC system based on occupancy of the building and potential occupancy of the building, right? Because there's a difference between knowing the occupancy of a building because you scan through a door and now we know how many people are in the building versus tracking the person from the time they leave the house, since they know that person works in the building, and knowing when to adjust the HVAC for the people so that by the time they get there, it's already adjusted for them, knowing that they're actually coming to work today. And that may seem like a small detail to you, but to a lot of building, HVAC can add up to 25% of the total electrical costs of a building. So if you can save 2%, that can equate to millions of dollars a month for a lot of buildings. So what we're going to see is everything being connected. The point is, I'm trying to make to you, is that we're going to see everything connected on the consumer side, and we're certainly going to see everything connected on the professional side as well. So what's going to ultimately happen is we're going to be in a world where every device in the building is connected for a reason, and we have the ability to leverage that information and that connectivity so that we, as an industry, meaning us as in the AV industry, are going to be able to leverage that information so that we can provide a lot more data to a client. So for example, we can tell them how often projectors are actually being used. We can actually tell them exactly what they're being used for. Yeah, you could argue that Crestron can already do that with some of their tools, and AMX can already do that with some of their tools. Not really. They can do elements of it, but not to the level that we're talking about doing in the future. And you'll see that as we kind of go through this presentation, because what they have to be able to do is they have to be able to take that room and then connect it to the rest of the building and then allow that room to be managed, the AV in that room to be managed by the same tools that are managing the rest of the building itself. And this is not a minor thing, but there's a huge opportunity in us actually doing this. So what I'm going to talk about today is all about smart buildings and smart building technology. And then the next section is going to be about sort of the relationships, the people that you need to form relationships with so that you can get into the smart building technology market. We're going to talk about sort of the process that we're going to get there. So BYOD is part of that process to get there. And that's where we're living today. We're actually, as an industry, moving through the BYOD segment of the market. And that's sort of a buzzword right now being used in a lot of industries, but I'll define exactly what it means in our industry because manufacturers are using it and tools are coming out. And then we're going to also talk about building information modeling. And this is very important because this is sort of the future of architectural drawings, but also the drawings and all the products and middles that we do as an industry to our clients are all going to change based on them, which means our tools are also going to change. So all this is wrapped into this presentation of smart building technology. Now, I'm sure you've heard this term before, right? A lot of manufacturers are using this. But the first step in smart building technology is really something that I've talked about. Last time I was actually here in Dallas, I actually made this point. And that is to think about the entire system as a system, not as components within a room. And to do that, you really have to start with the control system. So there's an example of me messing up. You see that? Because it was supposed to be a nice little transition where the word the control system was supposed to come up on the screen, and it was supposed to stay on the screen. But Gary didn't see it come up as fast as he thought it was supposed to come up. So Gary pressed the button twice. So see what I mean, Mike? This is the first time I've delivered this presentation. So let's try this again. Let's see if I can do this. There you go. That deserves a round of applause. What do you think? So ultimately, the message I'm going to leave you with in the beginning of this presentation is start with the control system first. Now, what do I mean by that? Most systems, not all, but most systems are designed with something else first. Like, for example, we look at a room and we think, what display are we going to put in this room first? So we're thinking about how big the screen should be, how big the LCD should be, or the LED that we're going to hang on the wall. And that's actually not the place to start. The place to start is with the control system, because that's the interface to how to operate the room and how to connect the room to the rest of the building. And that's very, very important. And I don't have to go through and sort of justify that. I think those of you who are in the business of building systems understand how important the control system is. And most of us, in most cases, do the control system last. So say we have a $100,000 budget and we do everything else in the room, and then we have $15,000 left over at the end, that's how much the control system costs. We figure out what kind of control system can we afford for $15,000? We have $12,000 left over. What kind of control system can we afford for $12,000? So what happens is, ironically, the interface to the room, the one device that tells the customer how to use the room or how it makes it simple, it becomes the device that we're sort of deciding on last rather than first. So what we got to kind of do is flip things around and think about the design first, the construction overall, because a lot of cases we're going to be in the smart building world participating, hopefully, and that's the whole idea here. Participating earlier in the process, meaning we're going to participate before the building's even started being built, as opposed to coming in at the end and saying, okay, we have all these rooms here, help us figure out what AV goes in here. And then as important is the operation. So how are we going to connect to the operation of the building so that we're contributing to that building being smart? How are we going to make sure all the components in that building are actually connected, but also compatible with everything else in the building? So here's 5 sort of factors in considering smart buildings for those of you who are ready to pursue smart buildings. And I put that little thing at the bottom there if you're ready to pursue smart building technology. Because there's a set of you in here that this is probably not a good idea. If you're doing mostly hang and bangs, I would not get into the smart building world right now. I would definitely get into BYOD. So the second half of this, or the third half of this, or third part of this presentation will be directly applicable to you. But for the rest of you who are interested in smart building technology and what that means, because now we're talking about engaging with an architect during the process where he's designing the building, he or she is designing the building. And we're talking about engaging with a design consultant, who I'm going to actually have here on the stage in a little bit here. Engaging with a design consultant at the level that they get engaged with the client rather than at the end of the process. And then engaging with interior designers when they start getting engaged with the process rather than come into a building that's already designed and then have to work around it and figure out where we're going to put the AV because the interior designer didn't take into consideration all the AV things, or the architect didn't take into consideration lighting for the room based on how the room is going to be used. And we all like to blame the architect for that, right? They didn't think about that. But in reality, it's really our fault for not really stepping up to their level. They're not going to come down to our level, unfortunately. So here's are 5 things to consider. The first and most important thing is energy management, because that's where you can save a lot of money. And we have a huge amount of control here, because most of this energy management capability is coming through our segment of the industry. So for example, name 2 giant energy management companies in our industry. Companies that are contributing. How about Lutron? I mean, think about it. Lutron is lighting, right? They're controlling a huge amount of power in a building through lighting. How about Crestron? How about AMX? Companies like that. These are all companies that can affect energy management in a building significantly. So consider that early on in the process. Building dashboards. So basically what happens in the smart building world is there is a dashboard software suite that runs the building, and it's all tied together. And for those of you who haven't really thought about this, think about how complicated this is. It's dealing with security, meaning access, door access, elevator access. It's dealing with fire, emergencies. It's dealing with operational things like HVAC, electrical. But it also, in the future, is going to deal with occupancy issues and room usage. Meaning, as a room becomes more occupied, we have to crank up the white noise generator so that we're able to mask, as in sound masking, the room so that it's so when somebody's on the phone, they can actually hear the conversation rather than have to go to another room to have a conversation. And we all know what that's like. We all live in sort of cubicle land for the most part. And probably, ironically, even though we sell sound masking systems, or at least a lot of you sell sound masking systems, I suspect that most of you don't have sound masking systems in your facilities. So we have to be able to connect to those dashboards. The mechanical operation of a building is very important because if you're going to get into the smart building market, you have to be able to talk the talk and walk the walk with electrical contractors, security contractors, HVAC contractors, and everybody else who's going to take part in that building process. And all of that is mechanically based. Of course, lighting control, Leviton, Lutron, and of course, Crestron, AMX, companies like that also have lighting control systems. And then number 5, STEP. How many of you have heard of STEP? How many of you are Infocom members? Okay, so for all of you that are Infocom members and haven't heard of STEP, you're not paying attention. Because Infocom, this is Infocom's big initiative right now. STEP is Sustainable Technology Environments Program. They actually have a manual for integrators telling you how to build sustainable, green, profitable, energy-conscious systems. That is a huge element of smart building technology because the idea behind a smart building is not just to connect everything together, but it's also to by connecting everything together, make it run more efficiently and also make it run less expensively. So here's a statistic, just a little throw out one statistic. Did you know that statistically, if you put up an energy meter, and the energy meter could literally mean nothing. So all it could be, if you ever looked at an energy meter in your house, a little thing like a little counter that moves like this, or some of them are digital now and it has numbers that flip by. If you take that and blow it up, and you put it in the front of the room where you have a call center, and you just have that as an energy meter, energy usage, our usage today, and you just throw numbers up there, that on average you're going to save 15 to 18% in energy usage by just putting the meter there. Because people look at it and think, oh my God, look how much energy we're using. Let's start cranking off lights when we're not using them. So when they leave the bathroom, they remember to turn off the lights if they don't already have automated systems in there. Little things like that. When they leave at night, they turn off their computers or make sure that stuff's off that needs to be off because they see that energy meter there. That meter can have numbers that mean nothing. But as long as it's there, statistically, you save 15 to 18% of your energy costs just by putting a meter there. Now, think about that. If that statistic is accurate, which is what's reported by the smart building technology industry, if that statistic is accurate, imagine what you could do in real life. Meaning, if you did more than just put a meter there, but you actually started connecting devices together and only use them when they need to be used. Thank God for DirecTV finally doing that. Because for years, my closets and everywhere else I put a DirecTV box in every cabinet, it's been like an oven. And anytime you use a DirecTV box, if it's on, then it's cooking anything that's close to it. Now they finally put the thing to sleep if they don't see any movement in 4 hours. So if nobody's changed the channel or decided to record something, the thing goes to sleep. And the timer was like, hey, that's a good idea. We should do that too. So now more companies are starting to do stuff like that, and that actually matters because you may think, oh, that's not a big deal. But believe it or not, listen to this little statistic. The DirecTV box, because it now goes in standby, saves you $1.75 a day. Now you might think, well, that's not that much money. That's $600 a year if you have 2 DVRs connected at the same time. That's a lot of money, potentially, if you have 2 DVRs. And I suspect most of you have 2 DVRs. So that's a huge potential. I mean, it's like having a couple of night lights, or more than a couple of night lights on all the time. So the STEP guide is really neat. What Infocom's done is they've sort of come out with guidelines specifically for our industry, specifically for audiovisual industry, on how to be more sustainable, how to build sustainable systems, and also how to build energy-conscious systems. So read it. Okay, as a member of Infocom, you have access to this for free. I believe it's still free, and it gives you a set of guidelines of exactly what to do, how to follow, and how to actually make this happen. So ultimately, what's driving smart building technology is the building owner. Because the building owner builds this big building, and then they lease it out to all the different people who are interested in taking the space. And a lot of, as you know, most tall buildings, in buildings of 3 stories or higher, there's generally more than one company in that building. If it's 3 stories or higher, 90% of the time there's more than one company in that building. So then you have different companies with different interests And their interests are, they're not all aligned all the time with the building owner. And so the building owner wants this because they want to save money. So they want to be able to have some effect on saving money. Now, they could say that, well, we want to do this to be more energy conscious, but let's be real. I mean, really, the proof is in the money. If we can save money, then we can make more money. So building owners want smart building technology. Therefore, they're going to be willing to engage with you earlier in the process. And they already do that now with architects and interior designers and contractors. And we are a contractor in a way. We're just not the contractor that has historically gotten in on the project early in the process. So you have two options for getting in the smart building technology market. First option is installing new systems. That's a little bit harder to do than reintegrating existing systems. Now what's cool about this is what you can do is sort of dip your toe in the water by going back and taking all those systems that you've done. Think about how many systems you've done over those years, especially those of you who raised your hand, you've been in the industry 15 years or more. Think about how much money, if you could prove to a customer how much money they could save by switching out old displays that are CFL-based or whatever they are, plasma, with LED-based, and give them hard statistics on how much money they would save in energy, while at the same time upgrading their technology to a resolution that's more current than the past resolution, because they're probably already considering it anyway, that becomes sort of a double sale opportunity, because you have a double opportunity to market it. One is here's the new technology, and two, here's how it actually saves you money. And there are all sorts of companies out there, Samsung, NEC, Barco, Christie, all of these companies have energy meters, energy calculators, on their websites that help you calculate the amount of energy being used for these products when you put them into the system in some form or another. Some are more sophisticated than others. And more manufacturers are addressing this kind of stuff all the time. So reintegrating existing systems is probably the best way to start in the smart building technology market, because you can go back to existing customers and show them how they can do upgrades to actually save them money, especially when they're considering upgrading anywhere, they're already getting to the end of the technology life cycle. But the real opportunity in the future is obviously getting engaged early on in the process with those people that are making decisions and building, when buildings are being conceived, designed, and built. And that's the installing new systems. So obviously, smart building technology, although the tools make it simple to manage, it's still a human that you're dealing with. So even though we're going to have this connected world where all these things are going to be connected and the software is going to basically sort of automate itself, there's still a human at every level of this process. There's a human that's designing the building, there's a human that's integrating all the products in the building and the technology in the building, there's a human that's actually building the building, there's a human that designs the interior of the building, and then there's us. And so we need to be part of that process. So again, as I said before, don't think about the individual components in a building or in a room. Think about the entire system, and truly do start with the control system. That's the best piece of advice I could give you. Start with the control system. How can I take a control system and beef it up a little bit to not just make it control the room, but also make sure it's managing the equipment in the room properly? So take a step back and reconsider how you're doing that. That's the easiest way to kind of dip your toe in the smart building. So in addition to upgrading those LCDs to LED-based displays, and in addition to changing out the projector from UHP to LED-based projection systems, consider changing the control system out, or reintegrating the control system, because a lot of the components that they bought in that control system can be used again, just maybe need to reprogram it so that it's turning stuff on and off on a regular basis, rather than counting on the user to actually turn it off. Architects in general don't know what AV integrators know. They, for the most part, look at AV integrators when you talk to architects. For the most part, they look at AV integrators as suppliers of AV gear. They look at us as just like, we're the bridge to getting AV gear from here to here. They don't really know how technically sophisticated we actually are with integrating AV systems. They don't understand how our control systems can work with their control systems. They also don't understand why their control systems, like Johnson Control, for example, don't work with our control systems. They don't really understand sort of the disparity there. And we're getting closer to that. We're going to see that in the future. We're going to find more of these systems working together. And some of the manufacturers have stepped up earlier than other manufacturers. But AV integrators know how to make systems work. I mean, this is really what we're really good at. So in a lot of cases, simply educating the architect, hey, I'm here, and this is what I do, can go a long way with establishing a relationship and getting them to use you, recommend you, and partner with you when they're doing projects out there. Because we do have a true convergence of AV and IT. Those guys have had to become IT sophisticated. And then, of course, our industry is moving. This has been a buzz term in our industry for the last 7 years. So, yeah, the very first class in Infocom on AV and IT was 7 years ago. So, I mean, this is not something new. I know you've all heard of it before. We're actually there. We already have the ability to connect everything, for the most part. I mean, even screens. I mean, even Daylight last year in Infocom introduced a screen that's connected to the internet, that not only was connected to the internet, but also had a video conferencing camera integrated into it. I mean, that's genius, really, if you think about it. It seems almost stupidly simple, but it's genius. And so now all of a sudden the screen's connected to the internet because of that USB-A stick. And what's going to happen is, in the world of the smart building market, we're talking about thousands of sensors. And I've only mentioned a few, but you can imagine sensors on every single door, sensors on every single window, and this is already happening now with smart buildings, especially LEED certified green buildings. And then sensors everywhere managing temperature, power. I mean, I keep going back to those two things because that's a huge amount of money. And everything else that goes on in the building means that everything's got to be connected to one level, one type of infrastructure so that everything can communicate with each other. So when normally one thing wouldn't communicate with another, we have to make that happen. So when normally, I mean, screens aren't built to communicate with projectors, which aren't built to communicate with laptops. We're the ones that make that actually happen. Same way with fire systems aren't built to communicate with by default to communicate with noise cancellation systems, or by default aren't built to communicate with sound masking systems. But in the future they will, because what will happen is the sound masking system can also be used as an emergency alert system so that we don't actually have to install two separate systems. Most states now have rules that require two separate systems to be installed because of the two industries not actually working together and convincing each other that they can each do or help each other out. So this is going to require some massive real-time monitoring, way more than what we think is typical real-time monitoring. And be looking out for any kind of sort of anything that's inefficient, any product, any technology that isn't really ready for prime time. Be careful, because in a typical year, these sensors in the average smart building, think about this statistic, in the average smart building, so there's now a couple of thousand smart buildings around the world, meaning ones that you can certify as completely smart, everything's connected. In a typical year, there's 35 million data points coming from each of those sensors into a central database in each building. That's a lot. I mean, this is a real statistic. So one building, say it's a 5, 6, 7, 10-story building, whatever the average building is, there's 35 million data points. And that's because in a smart building, all the sensors send data every 15 minutes. So each sensor individually is sending data every 15 minutes to the central database. The central database is processing that information, sending the information back out to the device to get it to control that device properly, and then that whole process is repeated every 15 minutes, all year long, 35 million times in a year. That's a lot of processing. So for us to actually play in this market, how big this is and how important this is to a building owner, we're going to have to establish relationships that are different than the relationships that we have now. Architects, consultants, interior designers, and rep firms. All of them are going to have to establish relationships together with integrators. So I interviewed one of those architects, and this firm here is responsible for building a number of designing and commissioning a number of smart buildings in the United States right now.
My name is Robert Yori. I'm the Senior Digital Design Manager at Skidmore, Owens & Merrill, SOM. My role is to really help the firm work through, understand how we can utilize technology to perform our work better. One of the things about BIM is it really brings together these disparate communities, right? So you've got the design community, which begins to suggest what should be specified, and sort of, whatever equipment should be there, and how it should be routed, and how it should be placed, and where it should be placed, et cetera, et cetera. That information, of course, same thing with drawings, right? But then once the contractors receive those, it's their job to actually execute the instructions from the drawing set, right? So, but it's not A and B, right? It's a spectrum. So, moving back to the design community, the understanding sort of what is useful to put in a building information model from an AV perspective, equipment locations, specifications, of particular units or types or requirements. I did say locations. There's also routing. I mean, oftentimes, depending on the scope and scale, of course, the routings can get fairly complicated.
All right. So basically, what he's talking about is something known as BIM, Building Information Modeling. This is a standard. This is actually a standard that exists in the smart building world. It's actually not just in the smart building world, the building world in general has a standard for how everything is now executed in the world of building a building. And the difference in the way that we produce documentation and BIM requires documentation, there's a huge gap between where we are today and where BIM is. And because all buildings are being built for the most part to BIM specifications, there's not a single architect in the country that isn't working right now in the world of BIM. We have to catch up. The most obvious way that we can catch up is doing more three-dimensional drawings. Because what we do right now is we produce two-dimensional drawings. And the problem with two-dimensional drawings is, although they show the placement of everything, they don't show how they affect the environment. So they don't show how the object itself affects the environment. So, for example, on our drawings, when we show that projectors are placed in the ceiling, it doesn't show the relationship of that from a sightline standpoint. So when you walk in the room, what do you see? What does it look like when you walk in the room when you're standing in the door? Like, do you notice that big black box sitting in the ceiling? Because then we may need to shroud it somehow. Also, when the rack is placed in the room, we just show it as a rack there, but we don't actually show the effect that would actually have in the room, physically on the room. We show it in 2 dimensions, but generally we don't show it 3 dimensions. So the most important thing in the world of BIM that we have to change is we have to go to 3D modeling. And as an industry, we're going to have to do that. Now, what's nice about that is manufacturers are starting to do that now, and they're going to help us out with that. And we're going to actually talk to one of those manufacturers here in a minute when we get our panel started. But I also wanted to hear from one other person. So as you hear from an architect, here's Steve Imspack, who's the president of, I believe he's the president of Schindler Wilkie or general manager or something like that. Well, his title will come up in just a second. He's been in the industry for a long time. Schindler Wilkie, you probably all know, is a big design consulting firm in the AV world.
My name is Steve Imspack. I'm a partner at Schindler Wilkie. From a day-to-day perspective, I'm not a CAD user or anything like that. I use BIM as a design tool to analyze designs, more so than anything else. In my context of conversation, it's really more relating to using that functionality for 3D modeling more than building information management.
So I'm Scott Robbins, and I work here with SMW as their global BIM manager. Started in architecture and now here helping them with building information modeling.
I think with the advent of 3D modeling and BIM, if you will, it has really made a big difference in the ability to predict and at the end of the day provide a better design product.
Some benefits that they immediately can pull out of it are line of sight shots. Where if my audience member is in the far corner over here, how's their site going to look? Another great benefit they have is being able to tally all the assets into a schedule and how many of this model do we have, how much power is being used, what do I have in a supply,
Okay, so in the world of BIM, everything is connected together. So what happens is the drawings that BIM produces become the operational documentation for the entire building. So you can drill into any layer of those drawings into an individual product, which doesn't just give you the specifications of the product, but actually tells you how much power it uses at any given time. How often is it being used? What is it being used for? So we don't have a separate set of tools out there for monitoring 24-hour, 24/7, 365 monitoring. The monitoring tools are built into BIM. And this is the direction that our industry has to move for those of you who are interested in smart building technology. So we're going to have to move from a world of AutoCAD to a move of Revit, more world of Revit. So if you aren't already using Revit as your CAD program, that's the first step for those of you who are in that section of your business. If you actually matter in that section of your business, suggest that you move to Revit rather than using AutoCAD. Because AutoCAD is although it can produce three-dimensional documentation, you can't do anything with that documentation after it's done. You can't drill into the individual product, take control of the product, and actually produce reports from how the product's actually being used. In the world of BIM, when that building is done, we know everything that's in that building. We know everything that's connected in that building, and we can turn that over to the fire department, who, when on the way to the building, is going to approach the building because there's a fire, will know exactly how to get around the building, exactly what's in the building, and exactly what likely is the cause of the fire, depending on where the fire is located. So this is a very sophisticated sort of process that we're going to go through, but it's also extremely profitable and it's extremely opportunity. There's an amazing amount of opportunity for us in our industry. And again, as Steve said, it's all about room dimensions, straight lines, sight lines, and acoustics. It's more than just producing CAD documentation. So when you see a room envisioned in the world of BIM, this is what it looks like. It becomes a 3D model. This is actually a screenshot of a BIM of a huddle room in an actual building that's actually being built right now. So when people sit, you see the sight lines of where everything is placed in the room. For those of you who play Second Life, it sort of looks like Second Life in a way. For those of you who've been in sort of the world of Second Life, we're sort of turning technical documentation into Second Life. And there's a couple of manufacturers that are really proactive in it. Premier Mounts, BIM, they have a set of BIM products and specifications that are already, they have a set of product specifications already BIM ready. I'd also like to congratulate Planar, who's also done the same thing. So you're going to see more and more manufacturers start producing not just CAD documentation, but BIM documentation. So now, you order CAD documentation, when you're putting together a system, you'll actually have the ability to get BIM documentation. So it'll connect to a system and show you how it connects to the system. So from a standpoint of pros and cons, obviously, as everything has pros and cons, from a pro standpoint, decision-making process, design detail, accuracy of reporting, and the management tools of BIM are amazing. From a con standpoint, I think you could probably guess what most of the cons are going to be. Is the file sizes are huge, and obviously the cost of investment from your standpoint is not small. And there's obviously a learning curve here. But if you look at the future opportunities here, it's huge, and it's a direction that we have to get. So 3 quick things: talk to architects, understand what they're looking for. All right. So form a relationship with architects. Begin with the end in mind, like how the room's actually going to be used. And starting with control system will actually help that. And produce your documentation in 3D. So let's bring up Mike. Are you on the? Can you still hear us, Mike?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So come on up. Darcy, if y'all come up, Jack. So on the phone through Skype, we have Mike Carter, who's the Director of Integrated Building Solutions. So he is the BIM Smart Buildings Technology Expert at AMX. Live in person, we have Jack Wrightson. He's the principal of WJHW, which is the biggest and probably the most well-known design consulting firm here in this area of the world. And we also have Darcy Harrell. Darcy Harrell is the CEO of Total Marketing, so if you guys would have a seat real quick. I'm going to start by asking Mike a question. Mike, tell if you could sort of give a couple of nuggets of wisdom to the people that are here in the room about getting into smart building technology or things that they need to know about smart building technology. What would those be?
Well, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is that, number one, you are already building smart buildings whether you know it or not. Number 2 is a smart building is not a binary, right? It's not either it is smart or it isn't smart. It's a continuum. And so as we go forward, buildings become more and more smart as more and more smart technologies are added. So to your point here, when you were talking about, start where you are, it's kind of my perspective. You're already doing control systems, you're already doing AV systems. So make those systems smarter and make them more integrated into the building.
So how do they make them smarter? Is it just the process of moving to Revit for documentation, or is it picking the right products from the products that are existing now and using the documentation that manufacturers are producing? Or what are sort of one or two steps you could tell them how to do that?
So it's kind of all of the above. One of the things is expand your view, right? The traditional integrated AV system doesn't really tie into the building systems, but it should. And it's going to, as technology changes occur in building technologies, because, for example, lighting control, the traditional way of doing lighting control was it was self-contained within a conference room. Well, now that's tied into the larger scope of the building. So think about that. Think about starting to tie in HVAC. Think about tying in occupancy sensors to manage them better. And yes, in the building and design process, the BIM architecture lends itself well to making sure things are integrated, because that's really the goal of BIM, is to deal with the integrations, both physical and technological integrations of different systems.
So, Jack, so you're at the level where when dealing with smart buildings, you're the person who's interfacing primarily with the architect now, right? And what is it that we're missing as an industry? Because you're the conduit in a way, because we have the integrators who want to partner with you, and you want to partner with them because they're going to supply the gear and the systems that you design. But then you're also having to be a buffer between the architect and the actual room itself.
One of the things that happens is all these technological things have a progress where they tend to roll downhill. And AD is a smaller part of this. I mean, we're not the building structure, we're not the floor slab, we're not the primary structure. But it's really important to make sure you're not sticking a big chunk of structure through the middle of the room. And the original design value of BIM was looking for what they call collisions, which is, do I have a light in a speaker, or a light in a structure, or a sprinkler line, or something all in the same place? And formally, that was the construction industry's problem. The designers would work it out to a certain extent, and then so-called field coordination or consolidated services drawings, as they call it in some parts of the world, would be the responsibility of the contractors. Now, that's been moved up in the chain, and there's almost not a project we do. I'd say 90+% of the projects we do are BIM, 3D Revit projects. And what's happening is, it started out with big pieces of the building, it's moved into the little pieces of the building, and we have no choice in that. We either do Revit and BIM, or we go out of business.
So in other words, they're saying to you, if you want to be in the world of building, in the world of designing systems for buildings, you have to play BIM, you have to do BIM, and you have to do it. You have to use Revit.
Yes, it's a contract requirement. Okay. And what happens is this model gets turned over to the general contractor, who's depending on it to be accurate. Now, the general contractors and some of the big electricals and stuff like that, they're actually better than most of the architects, because as you pointed out, the cost of conversion to Revit is a big cost issue. And after you've done major collisions, it's not a huge amount of what I would call time-saving value to the design professionals. For the contractors, the big contractors, the more sophisticated electrical contractors do, they'll do an electrical substation room in the building, they'll model it in 3D, do all the parts in the shop, bring a kit of parts out to the site, and either have BIM-connected local GPS things that tell them exactly where it goes inside that room relative to the drawings. They can look at it, it beeps, boom, drill here. So what's happening is that now all of this stuff is rolling downhill onto the smaller disciplines, onto the AD, onto the food service, onto the...
So the same, you think the same kind of thing would happen where they're not going to be able to submit systems that aren't BIM?
That's correct. So what we're seeing is the contracts are going to be the same way that it happened to us, it's going to happen to you guys, is that your submittals are going to have to be done in 3D.
Right, so then all of a sudden this presentation becomes a little more important for those of you who do systems on that. Now you realize the importance of us doing smart building technology now and BIM timing.
And your as-builts are going to have to be done in 3D. It will be on larger projects, a contract requirement that you contribute to the model. So why do you want to contribute to the model? Well, there's all those physical things that everyone's been talking about how to make sure objects don't collide with each other, they're in the right place and where they think they are and they actually fit. I mean, how many times have we all done projects where we're told to put something someplace that literally wouldn't fit?
Yeah.
Well, BIM is supposed to solve that problem on the front end, but on the back end, documenting on how you actually made it fit is going to be part of the process. So Revit will be a cost factor they have to deal with, and you're going to have to deal with it, the same things that we've had to deal with is, how do I absorb that cost? Because people aren't paying me anymore to do this. So it's a business issue too, on how clever we should be, what are our strategies to be able to deliver the services being required to us, and still be a profitable enterprise.
And you notice you said it's trickling down to the smaller systems as well. Eventually, it's going to be, from what you've indicated, it's going to be basically any system that goes into a room.
Right. Now, the last thing that you guys have to worry about, that we don't have to worry about so much, is that at the highest stages of BIM, they have all the attributes of not only of the objects in the room, but they have their operational attributes. So the way that BMS type systems would, there's a whole fleet of software that people have controls, as you referenced, and other people have,
Right.
that tell you, I need to change the belt that's driving the fan on this HVAC unit, floor 10, quad B of the building. The same thing's going to have to happen. It's going to pop out in that the operational management, because the ultimate goal for the owner is to have this model that Gary was talking about, where he knows how many hours the projector can use, and oh, by the way, you're going to have to change the bulb on that next week.
And it tells them exactly where that bulb is.
Right. And projector number 493 in room 1-275, the bulb is going to go out next week based on historical usage. You need to replace it. Now, we don't have a whole lot of, maintenance issues like that. Our stuff tends to work until it doesn't,
Right.
as opposed to ongoing maintenance. But some of those things are going to have to be the attributes that people are going to want to see in this. And at some point, even though Infocom has tried very, very hard, AV will be part of LEED. And so all these energy managements and stuff will have a formal quantified issue that you're going to have to say, the system I put in meets these requirements or it doesn't. So between BIM and stuff, that stuff is rolling downhill. The last thing I want to say is the challenge that we all have, and we face this, you're going to face this, and you're hinted to the manufacturers getting on board as a smaller industry. Revit, when you buy it, comes with a whole bunch of standard MEP and architectural objects already modeled for it, families of objects. We don't have that in AV. And for
We don't
years
have
now,
we don't have the objects now.
we've been having to create our own. And when the manufacturers do it, it's fantastic. But for the manufacturers in the room, we don't need it detailed down to every last screw head and bolt on it. That's just data that we can't afford to use. We just need the general overall shape of the object. Because we have a couple of projects that are so large that every single discipline can't be loaded without Revit crashing.
Right.
Revit wasn't really, conceived of, most things are, for highly unique, complicated buildings that are very, very large, millions of square feet that load all these things in. So there's also some technology limitations on the programming as well that we have to work with.
So Darcy, from the standpoint of you interfacing with integrators and also interior designers on that side, what are you seeing in the world of smart buildings?
Well, I want to make a point that I think that we've talked a lot about smart buildings being all about energy management and being able to determine if the projector needs a new lamp and those type of things. But what's really important when you're talking to your clients about any type of smart building technology, that you fully understand exactly how the organization works and what they're trying to accomplish. I think that's something we often miss in a construction trade, of really understanding how they're trying to utilize technology, how they're trying to utilize their rooms. And that's where, as AV professionals, we can be very, very influential in helping not only to improve the organizational efficiencies of these various different groups by helping them to, whether it's setting up huddle rooms or implementing collaboration spaces, but also another big part is what organizations want to do to improve or specify their branding. So we, in Texas here, I'm sure all of you are doing a lot with oil and gas right now. So those companies are making lots of money, and they want to show to their shareholders that they are up with times and they're actually doing things efficiently. So I think it's really important to make sure that from a high level standpoint, when you're talking to your clients, when you're talking to architects, that you have an understanding not just of what smart building technology can do from cost savings, but what it can do in order to speed up decision making and help organizations kind of present themselves in a different light. As far as what we're trying to do, I mean, as an entity that's in between the manufacturer and the dealer and the integrator, I think it's really important that we come to you with good good information and as a trusted business advisor. And my organization has been trying to do this by actually developing content so that you can go to architects with actual good feedback, and you can have presentations to go and talk to them about these various different things that are happening, whether it's smart building technology or BIM or collaboration, all these BYOD, all these different buzzwords that actually affect how buildings are being developed now. Having those resources and knowing how to use them is so important. I can imagine looking out, and I know a lot of you either own or work for a small business, right? We're small business owners, we work for small businesses. I can't imagine that any of you, well, and maybe you did, I mean, who pulled up in their Tesla today?
One guy.
One guy, Gary did. Profit margins are not going up, and we have to be more efficient with our use of time and resources. So talk to the manufacturers here, talk to the folks from Almo. Use your resources. If you have an opportunity to go and talk to a big client, go and talk to a group of architects, talk to a general contractor, and you're not maybe as familiar with everything that you want to cover, use your resources. That's what we're here for. And I think that that's something that often, as small business owners or working for small businesses, you try to do it all. So that would be nice.
Well, first of all, I appreciate y'all being here, but I do want to ask Mike a quick question. So Mike, you heard that directly from Jack. Where is AMX in the process of fixing all the documentation to be done?
So we actually started on that several years ago, and as we release a new product, we release a BIM model with it. And that BIM model is very detailed. It includes all the connectivity, power consumption, physical size and shape. Those are BIM is the way things are going, as Jack pointed out. I mean, that's exactly what is happening, and the requirements are there in place. Starting at the design phase, that everything be incorporated into BIM. The good thing about that is, while it does make your job a little bit harder in the documentation side of things, it actually makes it easier in the long run. Because then as you go forward, things like submittals, all your submittals are essentially contained within the BIM model. So you have the product information, the product documentation, the power consumption, the network requirements, all of that is included in that model. So when the electrical contractor has to, or engineer has to design the electrical system, they know exactly what loads to build for, to design for. When the HVAC engineer needs to design the HVAC, they know exactly what heat loads to build for. When the network design team gets together to design the network, they know exactly what network jobs are. So it makes everybody's job, again, more difficult because it's a complex tool, but much easier to design that integrated approach. And that's really what the smart building concept is really all about, is about designing and building an integrated building. And integrated means everything is connectable and or connected to the network so that it can be managed and monitored. Gary, you were talking about number of data points, being 35 million. Well, we throw a big number at you, and that's, Microsoft did this a few years ago on their campus. They made 125 buildings, smart buildings. They collect 500 million data points per day from the sensors in those 125 buildings. Wow. So this is big information. It's big data, if you're familiar with that term. And it starts with a BIM model, right? Because now I know exactly what to expect. I also know when I need to change something out, I know how to change it out. I know how to very easily swap a product out and upgrade or enhance, so that end of life process of I've got a 3 to 5 year life on this technology. That's immediate. That's contained within the model as well. So maintenance and monitoring of the components is key in that as well.
But every new product, you heard it from Mike himself, every new product has BIM, and they're going back and changing all the current products to be BIM. Darcy, I really appreciate you guys.
Actually, it's been that way for a couple of years.
That's good. Well, congratulations. Thanks for coming, Jack. I really appreciate it. For those of you who haven't already formed a relationship with Jack's firm, you should, because they are the leading design consulting firm in this area of the country, and one of the leading firms in the entire United States. They're very well known, very well respected. You can find Jack on LinkedIn. And of course, you can find the firm just by going, I'm sure most of you know who they are. Of course, Darcy told you she's a manufacturer rep. Mike, I really appreciate you joining me today. Everyone knows who AMX is, and I suspect most people here use AMX because you're right here based here in Dallas. So I appreciate you joining. And your company's based here in Dallas, but you're in Philadelphia, so I appreciate you joining us today, Mike.
No problem.
Thank you. So the last section of this is sort of where we are in BYOD. So where we are in BYOD, this product here, or a version of this product here, this is the Barco ClickShare, basically revolutionized connectivity in our industry a year ago when this product was launched. How many of y'all have seen the ClickShare or heard of ClickShare before? So basically what this is this is the new version of ClickShare, which I'll show you in just a minute. Basically what this does is it takes any signal and turns it into a wireless signal so that you can connect it up to anything, anytime you want. So BYOD basically means bring your own device and allow that device to be connected to the projector or the display just by connecting that device to the network or some simple way that doesn't require an architect or an AV integrator to redesign the room every time you bring something new to the room. So if I want to connect my iPad, I can do it. If I want to connect my laptop, I can do it, and I don't have to have a whole bunch of AV engineers sitting around figuring out how to do it. It's all done wirelessly. And so we'll talk about this was the product that sort of set the standard for BYOD, and most of the manufacturers have followed with their versions of BYOD. I'm going to turn off these mics and stop getting that feedback. I apologize. I should have done that before I set them down. So these huddle rooms, which are primarily where BYOD is used, huddle rooms are like the new sort of term for conference rooms, I guess you could say. They're not really, it's not a fad, it's definitely a trend. The trend is that 28% of executives have used a presentation device to share content in a meeting. That's sort of where we are now. However, what they're doing is they're now starting to bring in devices like this. They're bringing in the device they have in their pocket. They're bringing in the device that they have in their briefcases to make a presentation. That device may not be one that has a VGA port, an HDMI port, or something else on it. They're going to want to be able to just connect that to the system real simply. And that's sort of what drove this BYOD trend. So BYOD encourages collaboration because it allows anybody to sort of play in the system. Again, if you don't know how ClickShare works, if you want someone to connect to the system, you hand them this. And this has a USB port on it. And then they're on the system. They don't have to do any software configuration or anything. If they have an iPad or an iPhone, all they do is go to the wireless settings and join the network, and then their device is on the network. It contains basic AV components. You can't connect everything this way. You can't connect a Blu-ray player very easily this way, but most of the devices that we would bring in on our own, we can connect. And right now, it's a moving target because the devices are changing all the time. It's not like we're finished. It's not like we have the last version of the iPhone. It's certainly not like we have the last version of the iPad, and we certainly know that Samsung is coming out with more tablets. So really, this is sort of an adjunct Band-Aid to where we're going to be in the future. And that is everything connected to the network, where everything is structurally collaborated, continuously collaborated via the network. So Barco's ClickShare, they have two versions. CSC was the traditional one, CSM was the new one. That's this one here, which is the little.
Hello everyone, my name is Sandra
version.
Page. I'm product manager for ClickShare at Barco. We're here at ISC 2014 in Amsterdam. This show we are introducing our newest member in the ClickShare family, which is called CSM. It's a smaller version of the ClickShare as we know it today. It only shows one source on screen at a time, and we sell it with 2 buttons, and it comes at a lower price. It's perfect for smaller rooms, for huddle rooms, where you want to quickly share content from your apps or from your laptop using a ClickShare button. And on the other side of the booth, we are showing the member that you already know, the CSC, which is the ClickShare-based unit for larger meeting rooms. Here it's in a very specific setup with a panorama projector that's a 2560 by 1080 resolution. And you can see that it's a big screen where you can show up to 4 sources actually all next to each other. Audio is included as well. It's a great
Okay, so then Christie followed with Brio. How many of you have seen the Brio? It's brand new. It's just barely started shipping, but they have a version of that BYOD product called Brio. It allows you to not only do what ClickShare does, but also allows you to connect sources from other locations to the room that the Brio is in as well. So you can bring in a source from a distant location across the internet, from another country, from another place in the building. So it's not just contained in the individual room. Now we're actually going outside the room and allowing somebody to, oh, by the way, connect to the system without having to go through some sophisticated connectivity structure or load software on the computer. Both of these devices, by the way, are compatible with both Samsung's wireless transmission or the Android wireless transmission systems as well as the Apple iOS wireless transmission system as well. This is Gary Kay. We're here day one at ISE 2014 at the Mega AV show here in Amsterdam. And we're in the Christie booth, obviously, and we're going to show you Christie Brio, the first time the product's been shown publicly in its finished form. Nick Wheeler, tell us what you do, Nick, for Christie first.
I am marketing development consultant for processing systems.
And this is definitely a processing system. This is Christie's answer to the BYOD market, the ability to connect anytime you want, anywhere you need to connect from to displays. Tell us about the Christie Brio product.
Yeah, Brio is a presentation and collaboration solution for meeting rooms. The idea behind it is to be able to walk into a meeting room and connect up seamlessly, wirelessly, any type of source, any type of device, whether it's an Apple, whether it's an Android device or a PC, anything seamlessly without using software, dongles, anything like that.
All right, so then AMX has Enzo. How many of y'all have seen Enzo operating? It's another new wireless connectivity system. And we, of course, shot a video on that, which I won't let you go
Hi, Mark is on it.
We watched the whole thing, but you can imagine how it works. And of course, Christie has Air Media. Okay, how many of you have integrated Air Media? Anybody integrated Air? A few of you have integrated Air Media. So these are the four sort of leading BYOD systems out there. All of them have one thing in common. And that is, they're all wireless, and they all allow for simple connectivity without loading software on the device. So you basically walk into the room, connect up to the system, connect up to the room, and there you go. And that's what's nice about these systems. Now, this is an indication of the future of where things are going. Like, this should kind of give you an idea where things are going. However, as you can imagine, all this was driven by the Apple TV. If you recall, 2 years ago when I came here, I did my presentation completely wirelessly driven by an Apple TV. Do you guys remember that? I was driving the whole thing on an Apple TV, and that's a $99 device that also allows for BYOD. However, it is a closed system. It's only iOS compatible. So if you have all iOS devices or all Mac OS devices, OS 10 devices in your facility, it's a great box to use because it's only $99. However, 99.5% of all the systems that we're going to do aren't going to be just Apple-based systems, and that's why I show you these other products out there. So collaboration costs about $99 to $5,000, depending on the sophistication of the room and how many sources you want to show at the same time. What's nice about the Barcode ClickShare is you can actually show 4 sources simultaneously. Right? And you can actually put 2 screens in the room and show 4 sources on one screen and 1 main source on the other screen as well. So basically you're sort of showing 1 source full screen and the other 4 sources sort of split screen. And so you have a wide range of capability here. This sort of is a bridge to where we're going in the future with connectivity. You can imagine that this is going to get bigger and bigger and that larger and larger systems are going to be able to be done wirelessly. So we're going to see different price points in the future, and of course, doing an entire room like this requires more than just that box. That Barcode ClickShare box, you're going to have other boxes that you're going to have to use. So the entire room, in your case, is going to be between $2,500 to $10,000. There's still a lot of opportunity here. But what's neat about this is we also still have the service contracts that go along with this. We also still have the remote maintenance that goes along with these kinds of things as well. And of course, there are still going to be applications where you're going to do huddle rooms the old-fashioned way with hardwired connectivity. So that still exists as well. And you can do huddle rooms with hardwired connectivity with 3 or 4 of the manufacturers that are out here. So you don't have to just look at wireless. And what's neat about what you're doing here, what you're going to see here, is you're actually going to see ClickShare built into the projector. So Barco's actually going to show you the first generation of projectors with ClickShare actually integrated into the projector. So you don't actually have to have this receiver anymore. This receiver goes away, and all you have to do is have these little dongles. So, yeah, they're here. Yeah, I was just saying, the whole line. They've got a line of projectors that have ClickShare integrated in there. The first time they're actually being shown in the United States is right here. I saw them over at the ISC show in Amsterdam. I was thoroughly impressed. I think you'll enjoy these. So, any questions? Because we covered a lot of stuff today. Yes?
With BIM, when are we going to see, how long can we expect specifications? If the system is wanting small integrators like ourselves to start going with BIM, when are we going to start seeing specs?
Where that's BIM required?
As opposed to 2D drawings.
Right.
The architect actually gives us a 3D BIM model of the roads.
Right. It's a good question. So I asked Jack that, and Jack said he's already seeing, I forget the percentage that he said. He shared it with us today. I think he said 90% of the rooms they're doing now are BIM required, which means ultimately it's going to trickle down to you. So I suspect that if you're dealing with him now, the answer is now. Like he's going to say to you, I want you to turn around and provide BIM specifications. However, the weak link here is the manufacturer providing the documentation. So realistically, 3 to 5 years. You're going to see a time range of 3 to 5 years. The idea of me coming here today and talking about this is sort of twofold. Melody, back in the back of the room, sent me an email a year and a half ago, literally a year and 3 months ago, and said, Gary, don't you think we should start talking about BIM? And I said to her, I thought last year was too early. I thought we ought to wait 1 more year because we're still a few years away. So this was sort of her brainchild to do this session. Because what Almo's trying to do, what I'm trying to do with them, is to let you know what's coming in the future. Now, you're obviously not going to leave here and leave with information that you got from here and start doing something differently. But what you can do is go back and say, look, the industry's changing. The way documentation is being presented is changing. We need to at least look at playing in this market in the future. But you're still 3 to 5 years away from being required to provide BIM specifications. But what's going to happen there is websites will turn into BIM websites, and then you'll drill down on the product that way so that the documentation is connected to the product. And you already see some manufacturers doing that now. So, any other questions? We got a couple more minutes. Yep.
Is there an effort to
yep.
all this so that one device is caught?
Yes, Infocom is doing that. That's the whole point of the STEP program, is to have an industry standard by which we all use standard documentation, processes, and procedures for them. Yes, and that's. Oh, you're talking about for communications ones. Yeah. So what's happening? Most building BIM systems use larger BIM remote management tools, and what's happened is over time, companies like Amex and Crestron has transitioned from having standalone systems to making their systems compatible with these larger systems from companies like Honeywell and Johnson Controls and HP, who do these large building management systems. So we already are seeing that now. Is there a standard? We're not going to create our own standard. What's going to happen is we will have to conform to the standard that these building management systems are using, which is ultimately part of them. So we won't create our own standard. We'll have to move towards their standard. So what will happen is all these remote management tools that all these projector companies have will sort of either go away or they'll have to become BIM capable, and likewise with the control system companies.
Is there an IEEE group working on it?
There is an IEEE group working on this, yes. Yep, there is. There's actually 2 different groups working on it. So there's a part of lead and also BIM, yeah.
So, if I understand you correctly, we're going to have to improve content management to our presentation, like 3D and Flash and all those things.
Well, so that's content management is sort of 2 different things, right? What's happened is in the world of BIM, all the content for how the product is connected and operates is built into the documentation for the product. Content management is an opportunity that our industry should look at for providing creative content services to our customers. Almo launched here today. Melody sort of breezed by it, but it's actually a pretty big deal. 2 years ago when I was here, if you recall, I talked about the future of our industry, or our industry missing an opportunity in digital signage. Remember that? That was my whole presentation 2 years ago, was how big the digital signage market is. And if you recall, I came and I told you it was $6.8 billion, okay? Which at the time was larger than the entire education AV market. Well, now the education AV market is $7.3 billion, and the digital signage market is $22.7 billion. So in 2 years, it's gone from $6 billion, it's almost $7 billion, to $22 billion in 2 years. So you can't tell me that this isn't a huge deal. So the fact that Almo is providing content creation services for integrators in the digital signage world is a huge deal, because we've always been able to install the screens. We've always been able to install the devices to the screen, and now we now all know how to network everything. The next step is providing the content, because that's where the real money is. So now NEC's been doing that. Like, they've had the content creation services, but that's pretty much limited to people who use NEC knew about it. But now Almo is making it available to any integrator that wants to use it. So I commend them. That's a great idea. Yeah.
How many of these wireless display devices that you covered are capable of doing full frame, high-res video?
Yeah, all of them are 30 frames per second right now. And so that looks good for video, but it's not great for video, right? So the limitation is the bandwidth and the fact that they're compressing it in a way that it makes it where the IT guy doesn't go, that's not going on my network. So, but what's happening is, as you know, all networks are being upgraded to gigabit networks, and when that happens, of course, there'll be full frame video, but they have to be careful about that. You're not going to see, you will see 4K wireless presentation systems at InfoComm. Okay, so you will see that, but you can imagine the compression that they're using to actually pull that off on both ends. So it's almost like having a codec on both ends, like back in the old video conferencing days. But to answer your question, I'm going to guess, we're a couple years away from full frame video. So you're going to see, so I presented my entire presentation that way. So I don't know how many of y'all went on to the E4 site, but this entire presentation was being streamed. And those of you who saw it locally, you watched 30 frames per second video. So the whole thing was presented that way, so you get an idea of what, this entire thing was wirelessly presented, 30 frames per second video, so you get an idea how it looks when you're presenting. So it doesn't look that bad, but also at the same time, there are some limitations to that kind of stuff. So, other questions? Okay. Yes.
With the smart building dashboards, do those have like delegated access? Because I imagine that the facilities guys don't want IT managing HVAC.
It's basically seat license kind of thing, and then you get access, and they even give access to the fire department. Right? They get access to what they need to have access to, and then also outside contractors get access to what they need access to. Everything from UPS and FedEx to any service provider getting. But yes, absolutely, they're very sophisticated. But you're obviously getting it. It's kind of sunk in, and you get it, and you see how big this is and how great the opportunity is in all this. So. Certainly, this is not everything that needs to be covered on this subject. I've basically scratched the surface to at least expose you to what's going on out there, and I hope that you've at least gotten some nuggets, a few nuggets of information. But at the same time, follow up with InfoComm on the STEP program, and all you got to do is Google BIM, B-I-M, because it's everywhere. All of a sudden, you're going to start hearing the term, and you're going to go why did I go from never hearing this to I sat in this presentation and heard it, and then now hearing it all over the place. It's just sort of what happens. It's going to be sort of a sea change that's going to happen in a very short period of time. So at least pay attention to it. And what I mean by short period of time is our industry, short period of time, 3 to 5 years, we will have to change to be able to continue to provide systems integration in the future. Of course, we'd love for you to subscribe to our publications, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I appreciate you being here today. Enjoy the show floor. It is now open because it is 10 minutes.